I'm actually starting to get emotional thinking about it now, so yeah, it's actually quite hard to talk about some of it because it makes me still, after all these years, feel really upset that he's gone, actually.
Darren was born in Carlisle in 1970 and grew up in the Morton area with his mum Maureen, his dad Mike, a postman, and his older sister Deborah. He went to Udale Primary School and then on to Morton Secondary School. His love of film was ignited by his dad, who would take him to the cinema. Darren had a number of lifelong, all-consuming passions which started as a boy with James Bond.
Favourite Bond actor, I think, is an intriguing one because I'm from the Moore kind of,
generation.
Yeah, I was, and they do say that whoever you saw first is the one that you like. And I'd only ever saw Connery on TV, and then the GFT. There was a touring exhibition and of Bond stuff, and the GFT up in Glasgow over a weekend put on. I think it was Dr. No from Russia. They put on a selection of Connery ones. And there is something about that big screen where you watch him and you think, well, he moves differently. He was always called a panther, wasn't he, when he was on screen?
Yeah.
Because of the way that he stalks, and that was something that was it Dana picked up on, Dana Broccoli. And you do kind of get it when you see him on the big screen. You kind of look, he's just magnificent. He is Bond.
As a teenager, Darren developed a passion for British cinema of the 1960s, the Smiths, and especially Morrissey, who was also hugely influenced by British culture of the 1950s and 60s. Morrissey referenced this in his lyrics, on album covers and in interviews. Darren became a dedicated Morrissey fan and a vegetarian like his idol, and he was part of a group of devoted fans who travelled the country to see him.
I just do it because I really enjoy it. I love seeing all my mates, and I love seeing Mors, and it's fun. And there is something terribly romantic about sort of going into one town and then sort of staying there and then going through to the next and things like that.
I thought I was a Smiths fan until I met Darren, because he took it to the next notch. He was always looking forward to the next Morrissey gig, and he had he had it all planned out, strategy-wise, where to stand, where would be the perfect place to stand in front of the monitors to get the perfect view, perfect sound. He had it all kind of sorted out.
After school, Darren worked in retail and for a local print company. Like the male characters in the 60s films he admired, he was a bright working-class lad who was looking for more out of life. He started taking A-levels at Cumbria College of Art and Design and went on to study a BA degree in media production, gaining a first.
I would love to say I remember, but I don't really remember teaching him. I remember him complaining about the other students who particularly, forgive me, some of them were film students who wanted to. And he was more interested in the kind of media approach than film at the time, yeah. But then he became, when he studied film, he was very interested in film as an industry and not just, a director's art form, which I think is great and a very healthy way to think about film,
He did stand out as a student. He couldn't leave the department, the area. He came in one door and went out of another and would appear through another door. He was one of these students that he wanted to get involved with what was going on in the department, and he did get involved. And we started to rely on him to do various tasks and jobs, and basically we couldn't get rid of him.
When I first met Darren, he was doing some teaching here whilst doing his MA in Sunderland. I think everybody knows he started off as a student at, well, it was Cumbria College of Art and Design back in those days. So he was a student here. So I met him in that transition from sort of being student to becoming lecturer.
Darren started teaching film studies part-time in 1999 when the college became Cumbria Institute of the Arts, and to study for a Master's in Critical and Contextual Studies at Sunderland University.
Darren was sort of an impossible person to tell off, I found. He was always kind of smiling, and he used to call me Rich, and not very many people call me Rich. My parents never called me that, and he's, I think, probably one of about 3 people in my life that have ever called me Rich. And he used to smile and he used to say, "I'll get it to you, Rich." And then I'd think, okay, when will I actually see that at some point in the future? He always did get round to it, but I just found him completely adorable and very, very difficult to sort of tell off, I suppose.
I'm not sure that Darren was one of those people who you could ever actually manage in what might be seen as the conventional way. Darren was very committed to his work. He needed support now and again. But other than that, I also hope, and I remember Darren very much as a friend.
Darren was my film tutor in my A-levels, so for 2 years. And then he was my film lecturer for my first year of my degree. I don't know why we connected with him. He was just such an open kind of, like a character. And I think because we wanted to learn, he wanted us to learn as well. So like, we'd go sit in his office and he'd bring us DVDs in. I remember he used to bring like 80s films like Heathers. He brought me Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Just to lend, and he wanted people to kind of be as enthused as he was, and I think we felt that too, so I think that's why we connected.
What's brilliant about this film, I think, for me, is that it just encapsulates everything about growing up. And it occurred to me tonight when I was watching it that this came out the same year that Baggy Trousers came out. And there were all these things that were speaking to me about, you know, going to other schools and trying to give them a kick in and getting a kick in, all that girl thing, the football thing. I mean, I really do think that Rob said in his intro about quotable lines. How I met Rob was through the 30th anniversary screening in Glasgow, and I had a poster, a grubby little poster that I'd hung on to for ages, and I met John Gordon Sinclair, and I said, look, and it was a big dream of mine that I wanted him to write on it, Arrivederci Gordon, hurry back. And he didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And I expected him just to go, oh yeah, no bother, and sign it, because that's for me one of the key lines that he has in that film. But obviously life moved on for him and it must have stalled somewhere for me in the last 30 years. But it's an incredibly quotable film. I don't think I would have a Scottish girlfriend called Claire had it have not been for this film, to be perfectly honest. I think this has, you know, I wouldn't live in this country, I wouldn't, Claire, you know, it's all coming out tonight, isn't it?
I was a student of Darren's film studies at the Institute of Arts. And I first met him when I was at sixth form and I got sent up to do film studies at the Institute of Arts. And when I first met him, his first class that he ever did, he asked everyone in the room what the 5 favourite films were, 5 favourite directors and 5 favourite actors and actresses. And to this day, that's still the best lesson I've ever had.
I think there's that brilliant scene in Shaun of the Dead where he kind of throws a tantrum because he's just had to kill his mom, and it's so incredibly touching, and because he's gone through this absolutely horrendous day, and his mum and the partner, and he just kind of gets really upset, and it's really kind of tender as well as being funny and kind of obviously very gory because of what's just happened.
I think he was like a really good person for that first step to be, because he was like so enthusiastic and just wanted to talk about whatever you liked, and like even if what you liked was just, you know, not film, he was just interested in talking about it and stuff, so I found that really easy to get on with. It didn't feel like you were excluded from the discussion about film just because you were interested in more commercial stuff rather than like art cinema and things like that.
Darren became an integral part of the Institute, where he was known and liked by everyone.
Well, it was kind of creative people teaching creative people, yeah, and which I see this all the time at Carlisle College. Whenever I go in, I get really, really heartened because the uni, when they were trying to figure out who they were, they kind of lost track that we were already doing this, and it was a nice stepping stone onto HE if you wanted to do it here. But then it became, sorry, that's boring. It was fun. It was really good fun, you know. I mean, and
those of us who know the days of Cumbria Institute of the Arts and worked there, it was a flat management structure. There wasn't really anybody kind of being anybody's boss. We all kind of mucked along together in a lot of ways. However, I suppose in sense of the A-levels, I was kind of Darren's boss. In that we were trying to grow the programme, we were trying to get more students to come and study the arts at the Institute.
We always say that we were like a little family, so not being horrible about academia or snobbery about it, but in other institutions, especially in the university where we are now, there's a huge divide, but at CIA there was no divide. We were like a huge team, and it was a fantastic place to work. I mean, you always reminisce about the good old days, but actually it was pretty fantastic. Everybody went out the way to help everyone, and it was more about culture, art, and doing things that wasn't about making money. It was about doing things for the community and for students and for art and culture. So it was a fantastic place to work. Fantastic.
It was definitely a lot more of an artistic, like, community spirit, because I studied there afterwards when it was just the University of Cumbria, and it felt a lot more clinical and separate and a divided kind of place, whereas the Institute of the Arts was like an open kind of more free kind of thing, and it was really good. And I suppose I didn't appreciate it fully at the time because I wasn't that good a student for it, but it's definitely, when I went back, it was different, and you could tell.
You probably talked to people like Nick, Pemberton, David, Imrie. It seemed to be a lot more kind of eccentrics. This place seemed to gather those sorts of people. And so that's what I remember, that those eccentrics being collected into one room or one pub or one, you know, and things being said. Sort of mavericks, I guess, and, you know, maybe those aren't there anymore, I don't know.
He was a very influential man, and he had a big impact on my life. He was very charismatic, and I think, like, if you weren't interested in film, if there was anyone that would make you interested in film, it was Darren Connor. It's so weird now when I look back, but so he took us to, he had an independent cinema where he worked in Dumfries, and he took us, maybe like 6 or 7 of us there to see a film. I can't remember what it was, like an independent film. And then afterwards, we kind of, because there was a bus to catch, so we had a little wander around Dumfries, and he took us out for lunch. And then when the waitress came over, we were just kind of messing around, and he said he was going to have a scone with cream and jam. And then I made a joke, and I was like, but Dad, your cholesterol, you can't have that. And then the waitress was in hysterics, and he was like, he went bright red. And then from there on, we just called him Dad because it really embarrassed him. So it was just really funny.
You know, I mean, Darren was a Carlisle lad who suddenly got an interest in film. So, and I think that was a great way of saying to people, you don't have to be, you know, a big sort of intellectual arty type to enjoy this. Anyone can enjoy it. Come and give it a go, you know. And I think that's what the students liked about him. I think they loved it when he stood up and said, I love James Bond, or whatever. I love musicals. I love Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. I love Elvis, you know, which was probably a shock because you would expect your film lecturer to be talking about probably quite different things. Which he could talk about, don't get me wrong, he could talk about film from every angle and every aspect, but on that level, it made it really accessible, and I think that's why he deserves to be celebrated, and because he was a lovely, lovely man.
The films that he taught me, I still think about them now when I watch them and stuff, and I still have that running commentary that he used to do in class. Like, he sometimes, you know, paused lessons and pointed out funny bits of films and funny jokes and things, and I still kind of have that, and it's quite nice actually. It's like my favourite film, when people always ask, oh, what's your favourite film? It it's North by Northwest, and the first experience I had of that was Darren showing it to me, and it's sort of like I've got a better version of that film than what it actually is in a way, because it's not just a good film, it's like a good film with a funny like commentary track, and like you learn all the little nuancy funny bits of it, and you know, when I watch it every now and then when it's on or DVD and things, you still kind of get that, oh, that's you get those nice moments that he taught us.
Darren moved in with his long-term girlfriend Claire and her sons and was settled in the Scottish border town of Lockerbie.
He'd often said to me a few times that he didn't mind whether he had kids of his own because he loved the boys so much, you know, and I think it was great that they had him in their lives. I'm sure he's left an equally lasting impression in their lives as he has in ours. I wish my daughter could remember a little bit more about him. She was so very young, really, but
in 2007, the Institute became University of Cumbria, and Darren proved to be a thoughtful voice during the time as there were major changes.
He was kind of the mortar between the bricks, the kind of person that glues things together, that brings people, you know, he was, if you ever, I seem to remember this, if you ever kind of had a moment of criticism towards anybody else, Darren would always leap to their defence and give the opposite kind of side, not just because he was being difficult, but because he was encouraging you always to see the good in somebody else.
Darren believed in the cultural potential of the city. He was instrumental in putting on 2 arts festivals, and he briefly co-managed the City Cinema, aiming to keep an independent cinema running in Carlisle. But with lack of funds, it was sold to private developers.
He was, passionate about about culture, about film, and he didn't just take that to the students he worked with, he took that into the broader, wider community.
He was always keen on doing community things, yeah. With him, we liked doing the arts festival, which they used to give us, at one time, $3,000, and we used to get about 30 grand's worth of work out of people, you know. It's unprincipled, really, because you're supposed to pay artists, but they liked us, you know, so we would do it. But after about 3 years, you had to get got the feeling we can't do this again. And also, here's another thing, that if you do something good, expect someone else to take the credit for it, you know? Because it's just how the world is, you know.
The organiser of Carlisle Arts Festival is Darren Connor, and he joins me in the studio now. Darren, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. This must be a pretty big screen then.
It is, yeah. Quite exciting, to be honest. We've never done it before. It's something we've been trying to do for 5 years. And just coming in this morning and listening to things, people keep telling me, well, nothing goes on in Cumbria. I have to disagree this weekend. I've never seen a busier one, to be honest.
Yeah, it's all kicking off, isn't it, this
weekend?
It is,
fantastic.
Did this choice of movie surprise you?
To be honest, no. It's a great movie. It's one of those films as well, particularly with the way the weather is at the moment, that we wanted something that people could dip into rather than sit and watch for an hour and a half. So hopefully people come along, watch a bit of the songs. The one thing I'm not going to mention this morning is the weather, just to be on the safe side.
They had a film festival, I don't know if you remember, they used to do a film festival all the time and have absolutely zero money and get immensely frustrated with them all for spending all this cash that they didn't have. And now I find myself in exactly the same position. We're doing a film festival with absolutely no money and spending money that we haven't got. And to be honest, the whole time I've been doing it, I've wished he was here, giving us some direction and some help. But and also lots and lots of nights out. Adored him, absolutely adored him.
That sense of a passion for the art form, but not just keeping it within an institution, but actually taking it to a broader public. I think that's why we should honour him with a film festival, which is like the perfect thing to do, really, for Darren.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you for coming and bringing your tea. I think you can always tell at the RBC if we've got dignitaries in, because the chocolate Jaffa cakes come out, which, as we know, isn't every week. We're absolutely delighted to welcome director of Donkeys, which you've just seen, and judging by its reaction, and one of the chaps who couldn't stay because, in true Dumfries tradition, he had a bus to get.
Well, it all started with a previous
film officer, Darren, who they got together and decided that it would be quite good to have a film club where people come and watch films and then discuss them afterwards, almost like a book club with films. And it just started in a small room across at Gracefield and with a TV and a DVD player, and then gradually it moved over to the Burns Centre, and it became sort of a regular Monday night slot where they watched a film, had a cup of tea and coffee and discussed it afterwards, and it sort of built and more people came and it opened it more to the public, and it became really quite busy and popular.
I thought, who's this guy pacing backwards and forwards in front of the screen? Because it's as if he couldn't keep still. You know, he'd walk from one side of the auditorium to the other and back again while talking constantly. And I thought, I couldn't figure it out. What is going on? Who is this person? And then it very quickly came through all that he knew what he was doing. He really knew what he was talking about, and he knew how to interact and keep people's interest going. So yeah, it was apparent straight from the outset that he was different, very different.
It was Darren's enthusiasm that just made it a really good night to come along to, and almost no matter what the film was, he did pick out a few that were a bit like, you know, specialised. He was trying to educate us every so often, and it didn't always work, but most times it did.
Generally, I think in those days the film started at 6:30, and you'd be looking at the watch or the clock about 6:25. Darren wasn't here. 6:26, he still wasn't here. 6:27.
And you thought, I'm just going to have to start the film, and then he sort of walks in with a big grin on his face, said, "I'm using the laptop tonight. Can you set it up for me?" And like, in 5 minutes, and I want sound and I want images. So I thought, this happened a couple of times, and I thought, I'm going to be ready for him. Had everything all set up, and he came and said, "I'm not using it tonight."
The age group of people who come to see the films is on the higher side, you know. But occasionally you get a group of youngsters come in, and he knew how to kind of get them on board with what was happening and how to encourage their enthusiasm, and he was just really good at that with the kids. I think that's important.
And we wanted to show some sort of recognition that he was thought of quite highly at the Burns Centre by lots of people. So we thought, what could we do? And we thought a tree would be an ideal symbol.
I think they focused on a tree because he was really kind of, I didn't realise this aspect of him, but he was into kind of nature and, you know, he cooked stuff. I remember talking to him, he wanted to keep bees. He knew I kept bees, and he really was keen on keeping bees, and I lent him some books. He never actually did get to keep bees. So I think probably a tree's as good an idea as anything, yeah.
On the 19th of June 2011, Darren set off on a 50-mile charity cycle event, the Lockerbie Loop. Later that day, instead of getting the annual Father's Day phone call from Darren, Mike got a phone call from his daughter Deborah to say that his son had died of a heart attack. It was an unbelievably difficult time as Darren's mum was in the last stages of cancer, and now Darren was gone too.
We lost Darren on the Sunday, and I went into work on the Monday morning, and I hadn't been in that office on Brampton Road for very long at all when my desk phone rang, and at the end of the phone was Claire, Darren's partner. And through you know, some difficult tears and sobs, Claire told me what had happened to Darren. And I tried to keep my voice together while I spoke to Claire, but as soon as I put the phone down, I broke down. And I remember Simon Davis coming into my office just after that, and he said, "I see you've already heard."
And I'd been on a cycle ride with Darren on a Friday with Simon, and we'd done quite a long cycle ride from here up into the Eden Valley, and we'd stopped at a pub. You know, it was a beautiful summer's evening. We had a pint of beer. You know, it was just great. You know, and then a couple of days later, he'd done the charity race, and then I think on the Monday or Sunday, I'm not sure, the events, we got an email. So devastated. You know, absolutely devastated. I came in here, and I just had to go and say Fiona, you know. So, and as I said, you know, it's probably affected me more than it had. I mean, the close death of some of my family, you know. Just to see someone on a Friday and then be gone, and, you know.
Well, just unreal. I just couldn't quite believe it because he was so very, very young. You know, he'd just celebrated his 40th birthday. You know, he was a little bit younger than me, shall we say. So, you know, it's no age. It was just no age.
I think disbelief for a really long time, to be honest. Not believing that he'd gone. Really sad. Very similar age, only about 6 weeks between us. So, sad. The funeral was different, very, very different. We had the wake back at the Brampton Road campus, and all the staff that knew Darren all somehow got involved, and students, past and present students, were involved.
Obviously it was really hard, but I remember when everyone queues to like say their condolences at the end, and we met Claire, and I was like, oh, we're Sophie and Jade, and she actually said, you called him Dad, and so that was nice. We kind of had a little moment like that.
What happened then on Brampton Road was not a wake in the conventional sense. It was actually the greatest celebration of anybody's life that you could imagine. We had stuff hanging on the walls that he'd been involved with. We had printouts of his Twitter feeds, which of course were absolutely hilarious. There were people dressed up, I remember, in Star Wars outfits and so on. James Bond characters were on the scene. It was absolutely fabulous. And what touched me especially, what I do remember, were some of the people that I met, because these were people who Darren had contact with outside of the university, outside of his work with us, and yet he had still built that rapport, relationship and that love of film with them, people from Dumfries Arts Centre and so on.
I think you go through life and you meet a few people in your life who very quickly have a kind of an effect on you. And it's this combination of the fact that they're really interesting people to be around, and they have a sense of humour, and they're really nice people. And they come in, and if you get the kind of proportions right in a package, that person can have like quite a deep effect on you. You don't get many people like that in your life, or come across them, should I say. Darren was one of them.
It was really sad, but it was so nice to see so many people there. And like the uni was full, like just full of people, and there was like people were looking at all the like the artwork people had contributed, and like there was films playing, and it was really sad but really beautiful.
Since his funeral as well, which I know that sounds really awful, but I really enjoyed it. And you think to yourself, wow, everybody loved him. Everybody said some fabulous things, and everybody was really brave. It wasn't lots of tears. Not from what I can remember. Upsetting speeches, but beautiful as well. And I remember at the Brampton Road campus thinking, we've got to do something. Look at everyone getting together about him. So for like 5 years, I thought, we've got to do something, whether it's a party or let me do something. And then 5 years later, it took 5 years to do something. That's pretty bad, isn't it?
It's important for me because he was my friend, and I think that these connections are much more important than, not than learning, because teaching and learning I believe in, yeah, but then a lot of things that he worked for kind of disappeared.
It's a real shame because after he died there were lots of talk about doing something here, having a plaque, so it's taken some time, but I think it's great.
I wondered why I was doing any of this at all the other day, so I went down to the cemetery, stood where he's been put in the ground, It's me and him, we carried his coffin down there, not on our own of course, but then I thought, yeah, this is okay idea, I'm for it. Will that do?
Is that okay? If there's any gaps when you get back, just email me. I'll be checking my emails over Easter, and because I'm going to go to and see Debbie before she takes my ass. But let me know how you get on. If you want me to read anything of it, just email it to me, and I'll have a look over Easter. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent.
Okay.
Cheers. That was good. I never get to talk about.
Why did she go? Did she say? Did she leave a note? Why would she want to leave her home? We don't know. We just don't